Thank you, Darren. In this section, we will examine how a hypothetical watershed in Manitoba might look in the year 2040. It's a watershed that embodies many of the concepts and principles that were discussed earlier in Session 3 by Dimple Roy, Brian Ye, and in the Ducks Unlimited video. We present a watershed that has undergone considerable economic growth while reducing nutrient loading to Lake Winnipeg. This watershed features a number of beneficial management practices, restored wetlands, but centers around a biorefinery to make high-value products from low-value inputs. This is a concept we will define later. This is not an all-encompassing vision, but it features many elements that will make it possible to achieve both a cleaner Lake Winnipeg and a more vibrant economy. In looking at the watershed as a whole, we are taking a systems approach, an ecosystems approach, in fact. But achieving a vision like this will require strategic thinking and strategic investment in innovative technology, enabling policies, and effective communication and outreach. The development of a watershed for the future begins with an examination of Manitoba's land base. Manitoba is not homogeneous. An ecoregion is an area with a recurring pattern of ecosystems associated with characteristic combinations of soils and landforms. They also have profound influence on human settlement patterns and activities taking place in the area. There are over a dozen ecoregions in Manitoba, but we are focusing only on those 5 found in the southern agricultural portion of the province, primarily those areas falling within the Red and Assiniboine river basins. Firstly, let's examine the Lake Manitoba Plain, the ecoregion familiar to most of us as comprising the Red River Valley. With the cities of Portage la Prairie, Winkler, Steinbach, and Winnipeg, this is the most highly populated ecoregion in the province. It's also home to some of the most productive farmland on what was once the bed of Lake Agassiz. The major crops grown in this region are canola, wheat, soybeans, and oats, and to a lesser extent, corn and sunflower. The valley is also home to a significant livestock population, including hog farming. The Interlake Plain is the area of sandy soils between Lakes Winnipeg and Manitoba. It forms the northern fringe of agriculture in central Manitoba, and it also extends southeast of the Red River Valley to form the eastern extent of agriculture in the Canadian prairies. Around a third of this region is forested, a quarter is grassland, and a fifth is farmed. The farming in this area is more extensive, with greater amounts of forage and pasture land and pork production with a processing facility in Le Broquerie. The poor drainage and high water tables in this area often lead to recurrent flooding, particularly in the northern parts. There is considerable tourism in this ecoregion, especially along the shores of Lakes Winnipeg and Manitoba. Moving westward is the Aspen Parkland, the rolling hills typical of the southwestern part of the province. Over half of this ecoregion is farmed, and the main crops are wheat, followed by canola and alfalfa. There is a canola crushing plant near Russell, a flax plant in Angusville, as well as a first-generation biofuels facility in Minnedosa making ethanol primarily from wheat. The many wetlands that dot this region, or prairie potholes, are crucial wildlife habitat and receive support from groups such as Ducks Unlimited and Delta Waterfowl. The boreal transition is found in a few pockets around the edges of Turtle, Duck, and Riding Mountain parks, as well as near the rural municipality of Lorne. Once heavily forested with aspen, the ecoregion is now extensively farmed with around half its area under production. Canola and wheat are the main crops. The mid-boreal uplands is the ecoregion consisting of Riding Mountain and Duck Mountain parks, Manitoba's highest elevation land. Much of this ecoregion is protected, and only around 8% of this land is farmed. The farmland in this area is best suited to forages and pasture, with alfalfa being the dominant crop. Tourism is an important activity in this ecoregion. Based on knowledge and analysis of these 5 ecoregions, we assembled this hypothetical watershed. It's reflective of the 5 ecoregions in southern Manitoba, and it is on this watershed that we will demonstrate how the future can look. Before doing so, it's necessary to take stock of how watersheds function. Watersheds are systems, and it is important to understand the natural processes inherent and what they mean for us. We benefit from the healthy functioning of ecosystems. In a watershed, some of these services include the provision of food through the growing of crops and raising of livestock, the prevention of drought by storing water, the protection against flooding through natural hydrological processes, the protection of biodiversity. We also use watersheds for recreation, such as hunting, fishing, hiking, or going to the beach. These are but a few of the watershed services from which we benefit. By understanding the natural processes by which watersheds provide us with these benefits, we can identify opportunities for reducing water pollution. By examining cycles and closing loops, we can spot new economic development opportunities while improving efficiency and reducing nutrient loss. A crucial process in watersheds is the carbon cycle. Carbon is fixed from the atmosphere by plants, cycles through the food chain, and can decompose and return to the atmosphere as gas or accumulate in the soil. By intercepting the carbon cycle, the amount of carbon returning to the atmosphere can be reduced. And we will demonstrate shortly how this can be done by harvesting carbon in biomass. The carbon cycle is driven by solar energy and water, but also requires several plant nutrients in order to function. One of these nutrients is nitrogen, which is found in the basic building blocks of life, including DNA. A few crops are able to fix nitrogen through bacteria in their roots, but most rely on nitrogen produced in fertilizers produced in factories using fossil fuels. Today, 2/5 of the world's population exist because of food grown using nitrogen fertilizers. Once nitrogen is in crops, it moves through the food chain and can become waste with the potential to pollute lakes and rivers if not treated. By altering the nitrogen cycle, we reduce our reliance on intensive fertilizers and can produce more biomass while reducing water pollution. Phosphorus is found in rock and mineral deposits that slowly release through weathering. Phosphorus cycles through the food chains, and loading of phosphorus to watersheds is a major cause of eutrophication, as we heard in Karen Scott's presentation this morning. In Manitoba, most phosphorus is imported as non-renewable mineral fertilizer, and most leaves in exported crops and livestock. However, the small portion that remains in sewage and agricultural runoff is responsible for much of the surface water pollution we have in this province today. By altering the phosphorus cycle and intercepting it before it enters the watershed, we can enhance agricultural production and reuse this vital non-renewable resource. The final watershed cycle of interest to us is the water cycle. While water is necessary for plant growth and photosynthesis, the water cycle also plays a key role in the transport of nutrients. So let's look at the life of our watershed across 4 seasons. Starting in the winter, precipitation falls as snow and remains stored on the surface until temperatures warm in the spring. The snow melts in the spring, filling rivers and streams and saturating the soil. Most loading of nitrogen and phosphorus occurs in the spring. In the summer months, water falls as precipitation, but most water is returning to the atmosphere as evaporation and transpiration by crops. In the summer, crops are reliant not just on precipitation, but on the water stored in the soil from the spring melt. Soil moisture gradually decreases over the summer months as plant roots extract this water. In the fall, crops are harvested, evaporation and transpiration decrease, and river flows drop as hydrologic activity winds down for another winter. Throughout the year, water is drawn for residential, commercial, agricultural, and industrial use. By making use of and influencing these natural cycles, we can intercept and remove nitrogen and phosphorus from the system and enhance ecosystem services. There are a number of ways by which these cycles can be intercepted, and we've chosen to examine the biorefinery as a means of maximizing environmental, social, and economic benefits through the creation of diverse products. As you see in this slide, a biorefinery is essentially a factory. It's a factory that takes biological material as its input. In this example, a bale of hay. It could be straw, or it could be a bale of algae. It could be a bale of cattails. And through a biorefining process, it can create multiple products. In this slide, we have the example of fuel pellets. It could be bioplastics, such as depicted here with compostable plastic knives and forks. It could be liquid fuels, such as methanol, butanol, or cellulosic ethanol. Or it could be high-end pharmaceuticals and nutraceuticals. Biorefining processes can also remove nitrogen and phosphorus as byproducts, as depicted here with the fertilizer bag. By harvesting the nitrogen and phosphorus, it allows us to reuse and recycle these fertilizers, decreasing our reliance on non-renewable mineral phosphates and fuel-intensive nitrogen fertilizers. By using feedstocks presently considered wastes, biorefineries are able to generate value from low-cost inputs. Dean will now outline how the watershed of the future can supply these feedstocks. Dean?
With strategic investment in innovative technology and enabling policy, the biorefinery will be able to receive biomass from different segments of the watershed. Since the biomass itself contains nutrients locked within its tissues, harvesting valuable biomass from strategic locations in the basin will reduce total nutrients flowing into Lake Winnipeg. So let's explore some different options here. Firstly, we'll look at a farmer's field and the harvesting of agricultural residues. The harvested portion of a crop is a relatively small fraction of the total plant tissue. The rest of the plant's biomass, such as its leaves, stems, and roots, are agricultural residues. Agricultural residues, such as hay, are important for livestock needs. And since agricultural residues also contain nutrients and organic matter, they are also important for soil health. However, a portion of the bioharvest of the agricultural residues may be harvested to reduce total nutrient loads into Lake Winnipeg without compromising agricultural productivity. There are numerous other on-field agricultural beneficial management practices that can contribute to reduction of nutrient loads being released from the land, including crop rotation, intercropping, precision fertilization, and conservation tillage. We envision a portfolio of diverse beneficial management practices that would be adapted across the watershed, taking into account the differences between the ecoregions and landscapes. Moreover, large-scale cultivation of agricultural biomass crops is not considered, since the bioeconomy should not compromise food security. Moving on to our second opportunity, we seek to harvest biomass along the shorelines of waterways. Vegetation growing along the shores of waterways is referred to as riparian buffer zones. Plants growing in this zone assimilate nutrients transported by water flowing over the land, making this a very essential nutrient interception point and also source of biomass. In addition to improving water quality, riparian buffer zones also sequester carbon dioxide and provide a valuable source of habitat for biodiversity. If riparian buffer zones exist, then the biomass may selectively be harvested from the existing buffer zones. However, in regions where the buffer zones have been degraded, specific species may be planted, such as this case over here, where we have poplar trees along with alfalfa and grass. And the specific species could then meet the local demands of the markets as well as the farmer's own individual needs. Moving on to another opportunity, we can harvest vegetation from aquatic ecosystems, such as wetlands, as we have already seen with the Netley demonstration project. So in addition to harvesting aquatic vegetation from marshes, aquatic vegetation may also be harvested from lakes or reservoirs, dugouts, oxbows, or potholes, as this slide is showing. Zooming in, you can see that some of the cattails have been harvested. And there's also a green hay bale. And that's not a regular hay bale, that's a bale made of cattails. As the cattails are harvested and processed, nutrients that are locked in the cattail biomass are removed from the system. And the nutrients may then be extracted to create fertilizer. We heard earlier today that there was a significant phosphorus coming in from the Red River. If we could sell the phosphorus to the Americans after they have given it to us for free, it would be particularly useful. And eventually, our neighbors may catch on and want to buy this technology from us as well. Certainly, innovative technology can be the source of great prosperity, as we saw earlier today with the sale of the Noble Blade here in the prairies decades ago, as well as the current sale of Israeli water purification technology. However, not all nutrient sources are from non-point sources or from the landscape. We also need to consider point sources, such as those coming from human waste. Most human wastes in Manitoba are treated in wastewater treatment facilities, of which 85% feature lagoons. When effluent is discharged from these lagoons, it could be easily channeled through a wetland to further improve water quality. And this is actually already being done. This is being done in the rural municipality of Roblin, as well as Oak-Hammock Marsh. And this map of Manitoba shows 400 locations of wastewater treatment sites across the province. This represents 400 opportunities to establish treatment wetlands and supply biomass for the bioeconomy while simultaneously improving water quality for Lake Winnipeg. And in addition to wetlands, aquatic vegetation can be the main treatment to improve water quality, including duckweed. That green stuff floating on the water is not algae. It's the world's smallest flowering plant. It's duckweed. And systems have been developed to clean wastewater using duckweed. And in case you think I'm a quack, here's a picture depicting a duckweed wastewater treatment system. So this machine over here at the bottom, these are aerial views of a duckweed wastewater treatment system. And the machine at the bottom is a technology that has been developed to serve as an aquatic tractor. So it harvests the duckweed. The duckweed proliferates in the nutrient-rich waters, sucking up vast quantities of nutrients while also supplying immense quantities of biomass. In fact, this system here supplies the biomass as a green fertilizer. So the duckweed is being put back into the land. And some of you may be thinking, well, this is a really interesting technology, but would it work in our climate here in Manitoba? But this technology has actually been operating already for 20 years in the city of Devil's Lake. So if it works there, it should definitely work here in Manitoba. And I'd also like to commend the city of Devil's Lake for recognizing this unique asset and marketing it as a tourism attraction on their website. The ecological value of this system has also been recognized in the Wildlife Viewing Guide of North Dakota. With the right innovation and communication strategy, even a wastewater treatment site can become a tourist attraction. However, just as in our province, not all homes in the watershed of the future are connected to wastewater treatment facilities. Some homes and cottages in more remote regions rely on septic tanks or septic fields. There are diverse technology and policy options that are necessary to ensure that nutrients from these systems are not ending up in Lake Winnipeg as well. So, I have presented numerous opportunities for the watershed of the future. The watershed of the future was constructed considering the strategic assets of Manitoba. Manitoba's large land base and ample water supplies will facilitate the production of vast quantities of biomass, while being also promoting alteration of the nutrient loading into Lake Winnipeg. Reliable sources of biomass are available from agricultural residues, riparian buffer zones, aquatic vegetation, and wastewater treatment systems. So much so that we do not need to consider using our prime agricultural land to produce biomass. My colleague Matt will now present how the biorefinery concept can be used to further enhance Manitoba's economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean, and rest assured, nobody thinks you're a quack. The biomass collected by intercepting the carbon cycle will be fed to this biorefinery again, which can produce multiple high-value products from low-value inputs. By sustainably collecting this biomass, we are intercepting and removing the phosphorus and nitrogen they contain. Rather than being a watershed where valuable fertilizers are lost to surface waters and to the atmosphere, we are able to alter these cycles to the benefit of the environment and the economy. The nutrient management benefits of this arrangement can be seen when we examine the rate of fertilizers. Over 2/3 of applied nitrogen is removed in the harvested portion of a crop, while 5% can be removed by refinery feedstock. 21% can be intercepted through beneficial management practices, and leaving 5% remaining in the soil. However, under best case scenarios with wetland interception, the amount remaining in the soil can actually decrease to 0. The story is similar for phosphorus. Around 3/4 is removed in the harvested portion of the crop. Around 2% of that can be removed in biorefinery feedstock. A further 3% can be removed through beneficial management practice interception. Only 21% can remain in the soil. Under best case scenarios featuring wetlands interception, the amount remaining in the soil can actually decrease to 1%, with 16% being intercepted through wetlands biomass harvest and an increase in the rate of biorefinery feedstock production. Annually, around 105,000 tons of phosphorus fertilizers are applied in the agricultural region of southern Manitoba, with around 3/4 of these removed in harvested crops. The remaining 26%, or around 28,000 tons, remains in the watershed with the potential to build up and run off into rivers and streams. In the watershed for the future, phosphorus loading will decrease by around 25% to 21,000 tons under our base case scenarios, all the way up to 95% under our best case scenario. While the interception, recycling, and reuse of nitrogen and phosphorus is a significant benefit, the economic benefits of harvesting and processing this biomass into high-value products is enormous. Between 5 and 15 million tons of biomass can be harvested from agricultural residue and wetlands. If we only turn it into lower-value bioproducts, such as fuel pellets, it can yield the province between $300 million and $1 billion of revenue per year. If we invest into mid-range products such as liquid fuels like cellulosic ethanol, it can yield between $1.5 and $4 billion of activity for the province. However, if we think big and invest into high-value bioproducts such as high-end plastics, bioplastics such as high-end car parts, nutraceuticals, pharmaceuticals, it can yield, under our base case estimates, over $12 billion per year, or, under our best case scenario, over $42 billion of revenue for this province every year. Reducing nutrient loading to Lake Winnipeg is frequently seen as a burden or a cost to be borne by society, but this analysis demonstrates that this can be far from the case. By taking a systems perspective, we can take full advantage of Manitoba's rich land and water base, and if implemented correctly, add tens of billions of dollars of economic activity to the province every year while reducing nutrient loading to Lake Winnipeg. The watershed of the future, featuring harvest of biomass, diversion of nutrients to a biorefinery, restored wetlands, reduced nutrient loading to Lake Winnipeg, thriving rural economies, and improved ecosystem services is one possible vision for Manitoba for the year 2040. In order to achieve a vision like this, we have to think big. To use the examples Hank presented earlier today, we have to think the way they did in Chicago around the turn of the century, or the way they did in Manitoba during the construction of the aqueduct or the Winnipeg floodway. This is not an all-encompassing vision, but it features many elements of a desired future. With strategic investment in innovative technology, with enabling policies, and through effective communication and outreach, we can get there. Thank you.